What's up, good people? What's up? So I'm gonna make this quick. I don't have much time right now, but I did want to address this because it was brought to my attention. So they stressed the fact that slavery, none of us are affected today from slavery, and that reparations are not necessary. So real quick, how we know for a fact that things are affecting us today from slavery. I mean, you have many historians and scientists who will tell you that memory is in our DNA. Now, me myself, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not even a historian, but I study our history. But I also study life, and I'm a realist, and I identify with my surroundings, and I can identify with what goes on in life. Like our first traumas, our first miseries, our first grief, like our real first heavy emotions that we go through, it don't come through our own. Most times it don't come through our own. It's not through us. That's not our own pain. It's not our own drama. What I'm trying to say is usually a parent or an older sibling or somebody else who we are close to. And what happens is, as we are kids, we see them going through trauma, and it hurts us and it affects us because we start shaping that trauma that they're going through, not just their attitudes and the way they move and the decisions they make from the trauma that they go on. I mean, from the trauma that they have. So, I mean, they just use the trauma that they have to raise the kids that they have. So, as they're raising the kids that they have, or as they're around the kids that look up to them, they're acting out in their from their traumatic ways, and what happens is the kid is shaped and molded by those ways. And as the kid grows up, the kid starts to identify with themselves and then come into their own. Like once they come into their whole, they're traumatized with their trauma that they went through, along with the trauma that they witnessed someone go through. So let's just to keep it simple, let's just say a mother is raising a child, and this mother is going through trauma, like this mother is being abused by the father, right? And the kid seeing this as a young 3, 4 year old kid, 5, 6, 7 year old kid. The kid can't do nothing but feel this pain and absorb this pain with the mother, right? So what eventually is going to happen is the mother, some of the judgment that the mother make, whether she's too harsh or too light on the kid, it's going to take place. And then the realities of the kid is going to shape as the kid goes through life and grows up and matures. The kid is going to start adapting through the trauma and drama. So just imagine slavery. Imagine you're a slave, you're getting whooped, you're getting beat, you're getting brutalized, you're going through all this stuff, and your kid's watching this. Don't you think it's going to have an effect on them? And then once you pass and you go, now your kids going through their trauma and they grief and they misery and they pain. So you just think from slavery ended, and then we went into the Jim Crow era with all the coded, when blacks couldn't go here, blacks couldn't go there. Like, just think, blacks were getting hung here and hung there. So you just think all these kids, all these young generations witnessing this happen to the older generation expressing the trauma out on the young generation. It's with us. Like, I don't even have to go on and on. Like, it's with us. It's in us. And that's not even based on no DNA. That's just based on actual facts of life, the 360 of life. So what I'm trying to say is slavery is affecting us today. And you just think we caught it from the slavery part, and then the other kids caught it from they were the masters. So they caught all the others. They got everything that we didn't get. And everything that we got, they didn't get. So the teachings, everything was just totally different, opposite. So you imagine we're going to have two separate feelings and two different emotions in two different worlds, right? And then reparations is due because when you destroy a people like that, they have to be repaired. Like, they can't repair themselves. Like, you have to put them in a position to be able to build just as well as you can build. And if their stuff gonna get burnt down every time they build something, and you're gonna allow it to happen and not come in and help them as a government or as a country, as a people, to restore themselves and to stand up on their own, then you part of the problem. And what's happened is a lot of people have benefited from slavery, so they don't want to see reparations because they want to see us sons of slaves and us daughters of slaves and us residues of slaves, the offspring of slaves, still at the bottom because they feel like if we get to the top, we're going to treat them the way they treated us or the way they allowed us to be treated. But we don't got time for that. We God people, baby. Y'all be good. I'm Dollar Boy. Salute. Slavery was an economically efficient system of production, adaptable to tasks ranging from agriculture to mining, construction, and factory work. Furthermore, slavery was capable of producing enormous amounts of wealth. And at the bottom, you can see where this information coming from and where you can get the full story at. Now, let's keep it moving. How much did slavery contribute to America? The racial gap begins with slavery itself, which was a huge wealth generator for white Americans. The economic value of the 4 million slaves in 1860 was, on average, $1,000 per person, or about $4 billion total. That was more than all the banks, railroads, and factories in the U.S. were worth at that time. Wow. How did slavery contribute? Southern plantations using slave labor produced the great export crops: tobacco, rice, forest products, and indigo. That made the American colonies profitable. Many northern merchants made their fortune either in the slave trade or by exporting the products of slave labor. Now let's check this out. Why do Native Americans get reparations? The United States attempted to provide reparations to Native Americans before to show gratitude to Native Americans who served in World War II. In 1946, Congress created the Indian Claims Commission to compensate federally recognized tribes for stolen land. Stolen land. Did America pay Japan after World War II? Good question. After World War II, a number of treaties were signed to make sure countries like Greece, Israel, and the Soviet Union were compensated for the destruction caused. Those who lost the war were therefore required to pay the victors. The only Allied country who won but paid compensation was the USA to Japan. They paid, they say the only Allied country who won, who won the war, but paid compensation was the USA to Japan for the destruction caused. They tore it down, so they paid them reparations to rebuild. Now look, who paid to rebuild Japan after World War II? The United States. Yet, as we remember the great sacrifices of Americans and our allies to win World War II, it's timely to recall what the United States also did to help win peace after the war, namely, invest U.S. foreign assistance to help rebuild the war-torn nations of Europe and Japan, and eventually transform them into major. You won't have to go there, click on that blue down at the bottom, and read that full story to get the rest. But you get the picture. Now, did America pay to rebuild Japan? Americans diminished Japanese economic power and then paid the former adversary. You hear what they say? Americans diminished Japanese economic power and then paid to rebuild the former adversary. Slaves were considered adversaries. Americans diminished the slaves' economic power, and they never paid to rebuild. That's what happened. But once again, we see they paid the Japanese. Now, check this out. Why is Japan so rich after World War II? After gaining support from the United States, you hear that? From the United States, the people they went to war with, and achieving domestic economic reform, Japan's economy was able to soar from the 1950s to the 1970s. Furthermore, Japan also completed its process toward industrialization and became the first developed nation in East Asia. Now, do you see the significance of that? They gained support from the United States, right? To achieve domestic economic reform, to build themselves back up, right? So from the 1950s to the 1970s, they were able to build with this aid that they received. Now you go and look and see during the 1950s through the 1970s, what type of aid did the United States give to the black Americans, the descendants of the slaves? Now, does U.S. owe money to Japan? This is interesting here. It says with 1.1 trillion in treasury holdings, Japan is the largest foreign holder of U.S. debt. Do y'all understand what that's saying? With 1.1 trillion in treasury holdings, Japan is the largest foreign holder of U.S. debt. So, due to the extended hand that the U.S. gave them after tearing them down, they were able to become the largest foreign holder of U.S. debt. That's what happens when people are allowed to build themselves up and be as powerful as you are without you hindering them or holding them back. And if you did some type of destruction or caused some type of destruction to them, your job as a government is to come in and to allow them or to assist them in rebuilding themselves, because those are the laws of war. And you better believe that it was a war. It was a war declared against the slaves. It was a war that the Europeans declared against the Africans. That was a war. Now, they don't want to label it a war. They don't want to call it a war, because they have war laws. They have war principles. They have rules that you have to follow from war. Now, y'all might need to do a little research on that to try to understand where I'm coming from. But this is what has happened. And this is why us black so-called Americans are in the positions we are in and have nothing other than enough to spend, enough to survive, enough to buy some stuff that we think gonna make us feel good. We don't have enough to build institutions. We don't have enough to build banks. You see what I'm saying? We have enough to do it, but we have enough to get started now. We just don't have the support from the people who tore us down as people. Now let's move on. This interesting right here. This crazy. It say, is Germany still paying reparations for World War II? It say Germany started making reparation payments to Holocaust survivors back in the 1950s. Everybody started getting paid in the 1950s except the slaves. That's crazy, except the descendants of the slaves. And continues making payments today. Germany started making reparation payments to Holocaust survivors back in the 1950s. The 1950s was so rough for black people, man. And I know some white people had it rough too, but they didn't go through, they weren't victims for cattle slavery. They didn't go through that. So that's the difference. That's all I'm gonna say with that. And continues making payments today. Some 400,000 Jews who survived the Nazis were still alive in 2019, according to this article. So that's very interesting that Germany started making their reparations to the Holocaust survivors way back then. Like, they started making them. You see what I'm saying? America said, screw that. Screw our survivors. Screw the survivors of slavery. Screw the offspring of the survivors of slavery. Just, hey, pull yourself up by your bootstrap. And check this out. How much money did the U.S. give Germany after World War II? How much money did the U.S. give Germany after World War II? The U.S. government dedicated roughly 1 to 2% of net national income to the program between 1948 and 1952, and nearly $3 billion U.S. dollars went towards the reconstruction of Western Germany. You see? Let's read it again. The U.S. government dedicated roughly 1 to 2% of national income to the program between 1948 and 1952. Go look at history and see what did they give to the black Americans during that time. And nearly $3 billion U.S. dollars went towards the reconstruction. That means they built it back up. They helped them build themselves back up. So it's clear that reparations are due to the descendants of slaves, man. So I think this argument has been clear. And with that,